Okay, welcome back to Collateral Banter episode 38. I'm your host, Danny T. This is a podcast that I do on politics and authoritarianism and apparently now Jean Baudrillard. We gotta put that out there. That's what I talk about. Before I begin on the topic of today, since oftentimes I record episodes where I am talking to myself in a room, I've decided that when I talk about Baudrillard, I am going to read from his book and hopefully help launch my podcast for the day. So I hope to use Baudrillard's book to help me produce episodes in the future. So I've been going around local bookstores and libraries, taking up as many books as I can about Baudrillard. So I hope to use his words and intellect in future episodes to kind of make sense of where we are today. Oftentimes, when I was speaking to my friend Jerry, I realized that a lot of what he was saying has come true. So if that is true, then I want to keep digging further and further into Baudrillard's thought process and using that to try to make sense of the world. So yeah, that's going to come by. I still have quite a few additional episodes to do on George W. Bush and Bill Clinton and other topics. Yes, I'm going back to the presidents. But on today's episode, here on July 11th, after taking my break, I want to talk about facial recognition software. This is a tool, in case people aren't aware, that has been getting quite a few headlines. And I want to read some of the headlines only to you and then talk a little bit about it. So just recently, there was an article published at NPR about ICE using facial recognition to sift state driver's license records. So Georgetown University Law Center obtained documents that the feds were checking DMV records in Washington, Utah, and Vermont, and then using this information that they could find in facial recognition to then deport people. So that got me thinking, and again, there's so little regulation, there's so little oversight in it that right now technology can be used any way by anyone. Technology can be used by any government agency that it wants. And apparently, from what I've read in the courts, now I'm not a lawyer, but from what I've understood from several rulings, we give out our data willingly when we go outside. When we use our cars, when we're walking in public, there's no expectation of privacy. No expectation of privacy. And thus, when you are outside, your face is scanned through some facial recognition machine, you shouldn't expect privacy. So if they find out that you are a criminal and they want to arrest you, or they find out that you are not in this country with authorized paperwork, you can be deported. I get our struggles right now with Donald Trump, but it's like, how did we get here? That's been a theme I've been talking about through many episodes. Is this technology has been around for a while now, and we haven't dealt with it. And thus, now you've reached a point where you have somebody like Donald Trump who has an arsenal of weapons to use as any way he wants. He can use the technology that's available to target anybody he wants. So he'll target the groups most vulnerable initially. And then I'm sure he'll move on. I mean, this is unreal. It took Donald Trump's presidency for this to pick up traction in the news. And then I actually got a text message from a friend of mine. So my friend a couple weeks ago sent me a text message about facial recognition software. And it said DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, will use facial recognition on 97% of departing airport passengers in the next 4 years. By the way, I will post a link in the description of this episode to people so they can read the articles. There's people like me who are skeptical of the technology. There are people who feel this technology is dangerous, but it can be regulated. There's another group of people who are thinking that this technology could destroy humanity and civilization, and many people are becoming paranoid. And then I feel like there's another group of people who are business-oriented, business-savvy. They're investors. And they don't see that you can really make a judgment on technology. It's not good or bad. It just, technology is what it is. And it's here to stay, so get used to it. I think that that's what this person here who's talking about Department of Homeland Security using facial recognition on departing airport passengers over the next 4 years is a terrifying prospect for security. I mean, this creates a powerful weapon for the government to silence dissent. People can say whatever they want about WikiLeaks, but it is a dissenting organization. And when you dissent and you take on powerful interest in this society, you create powerful enemies. I'm not saying Julian Assange is a good guy at all, but I am saying the organization. But when you dissent and you take on elites, powerful, entrenched elites, they can use this software to put people in difficult, precarious situations, legal situations, figuring out their status in the country, if people need to be removed, if people have an outstanding warrant, if people have broken the law. I mean, I have now heard situations of people getting deported for a minor traffic violation. I mean, this is incredible that somebody makes one mistake and now their entire life can be upended. And the technology gives the power to the government to do as they will. Again, the thing about this is the government's going to argue their case in court about the facial recognition in airports. And what they'll say is, hey, you bought the ticket. You're the one wanting to go into the airplane. You're making a free choice. No one's obligating you to go into the airport, and there should be no expectation of privacy. You're in a public place. You're surrounded by public people. You have to go on public roads, get inside the airport. That makes me think that they're going to win, because the way the Supreme Court and other courts have ruled is, do you have a reasonable expectation of privacy? And you do not when you are at an airport. Okay? You do not. So because of that, the government can use this any way they like. We have to overcome that in a legal sense. And if we don't, I'm terrified for civil liberties and dissent. And I'm going to talk about that in future episodes. Civil liberties is terrifyingly in trouble in the United States, in Europe, all around the world. But the ability to fight back against government encroachment into civil liberties, I think, is a question for the 21st century. So my friend sent me this story via text message, and was looking for more stories about facial recognition, and I found something in The Guardian that, again, terrified me. And it wasn't even a recent story. It happened more than 2 years ago. This is another shocking, should be shocking, development in our understanding of facial recognition, government surveillance, government power. This is the future of politics. And here's what the article says, okay? I'm going to read from it, just a short paragraph here. Approximately half of adult American photographs are stored in facial recognition databases that can be accessed by the FBI without their knowledge or consent in the hunt for suspected criminals. About 80% of the photos in the FBI's network, non-criminal entries, including pictures from driver's license and passports. The algorithms used to identify matches are inaccurate about 15% of the time and are more likely to misidentify black people than white people. Well, what I will say about that last part is I've begun using a camera outside for the first time in my life. And cameras are the way that's developed. There's a clear racism in how black people look compared to white people outside in the sun. The way that technology was developed, and I wish I knew more, but it is much harder to record somebody outside who is black than somebody who is white, given the sun and the light. It's incredible how that contrast and how difficult that is. So I'm not too surprised by this last part, that the databases that people use, the algorithms that people use in this facial database misidentify black people. And again, that has to be part of whatever regulations come through, that the technology will obviously get better on that front. But for society overall, half the adult American population, 75, 100 million, 75 to 100 million people. Let's just round it out there. It's around that number, okay? Have their photographs stored in a database accessed by the FBI. I guess the question here in technology is, where does this end? Here's where technology is progressing. 2, there's going to be better technology tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, with the ability of us producing more and more data by us using the internet, taking photographs, uploading them, Instagram, Facebook, on Google. As the technology gets better, that database will only get better in terms of gathering more data. So it won't be covering half the adult American population. It will be 3/4 of American adult photographs will be stored in a facial recognition database. That should be terrifying to anybody listening here. And this happened 2 years ago. This technology has been around now for a while, and nobody has really been able, except those in the field, they haven't been able to get mass appeal because many people didn't understand it. There was a high rate of misidentifying individuals. But this technology, I don't actually know, but I'm going to say in the early 2008, 2009 is when I first began seeing articles about it. And so it was nearly a decade ago. And now databases are being stored by this. And again, databases, as I have talked about DNA, already exist. And so it isn't just facial recognition, but it is about human DNA. I don't know what to tell people except that these issues need to be brought up to politicians. But when you bring it up, it becomes people just think about it as a niche issue. Is it treated as an issue for the experts? If you don't understand technology, don't talk about it, or something to that effect. But the truth is, it impacts all of us and it impacts our lives. So we have to have an opinion on it. It has to be a political issue. Even if we don't understand the technology, even if we don't get how the technology works, we have to be pressuring political institutions and the courts to make this an issue, regardless of what political party you're part of. I would think for the right, you can make this about individual liberty, protecting yourself from the government, and for the left, I mean, a lot of this is about corporate appropriation of people's data, of people's lives, of people's faces. This has become an issue that CEOs themselves from companies that are developing facial recognition are asking the public to take more seriously. So there's a CEO of a firm called Kairos. His name is Brian Brackeen. He said this: time is winding down, but it's not too late for someone to take a stand and keep this from happening. And what he's talking about is facial recognition getting in the hands of law enforcement. I already think unless action is taken in the next few months, it's already too late. And then you can think about this technology being in the hands of authoritarian governments all around the world, which we already do see. We already see. It already exists. It's going to be in Saudi Arabia, in Turkey, in China. China's already using this with the Uyghur population. in Shenzhen. And see, this is how all the dots are connected. I mean, the Chinese are already one of the leaders in this field. And because there's unlikely to be any regulation on how Chinese authorities use facial recognition software, they're going to get to develop the technology faster. And they can sell it to other authoritarian governments if the United States and the Europeans don't. I don't have the answer for how to solve that. The technology in its distribution is terrifying of its potential. I'm bringing out the potential for abuse by governments. But of course, this technology can be used to help the police find missing kids so they can be reunited with their parents. Walmart, Target can use this technology to find loyal customers who come into the store often, then connect that facial recognition software to a cell phone, send them a text message with coupons. Potentially, it's endless, the opportunities that exist. I guess it depends on who's listening here and willing to say, yes, it can be used for good or bad. So does that mean we just let it go and just... I think it's not right that it can be used for good things and bad things, and thus we don't need to touch it. Because I really think the important detail is, where is the regulation on the dangers that these things pose for society? Where is the regulation in protecting the individual from potential abuse, which we know will happen if the police get a hold of it, if government agencies get a hold of it, and there isn't any regulation over this technology? And finding people, from driver's license to scanning license plates, essentially the monetization of human life creates the potential for abuse. So the fact that somebody can get a discount at Target, in my mind, is fine if that's what the person wants. But again, what's going to assure that that identification is protected, that your facial makeup is protected? Because we know it's not going to be. Companies are going to promise you that they're going to take care of your data and protect it. It's not possible to guarantee that. I'm sure they'll take steps as best they can, but you're in a constant attack all day, every day for that type of data. Here's the thing that people should think about. Technology can then be used to manipulate technology. And what do I mean by that? In the future, if I know that certain streets are scanned, maybe I'll wear a mask. Maybe I'll be wearing hats, or I'll be wearing actual products to screw up the technology scanning my face. I haven't broken any laws. I just want to screw with the technology. And I'm sure the technology will get better and be able to screw with your ability to scramble the technology. But this is how people are going to fight back, is to mess with the technology. And one way to do that would be wearing masks in public. Blocking, what if you can wear certain types of glasses that screw with the facial recognition software? I gotta feel hopeful sometimes. So when I talk about resistance to this technological abuse, these are ideas I'm just throwing out there, and I'm sure they exist. I will talk about that, actually. There is this ability, I think, sometimes for us to get paranoid about the potential abuse. It's certainly real. But I also think we have the ability, not just politically, to fight back, but to take small steps to dissent and to fight back against the technology used against people to potentially to oppress them. But I want to mention here China, because I referred to them earlier. They have this really interesting... So I mentioned earlier China's Xinjiang region. Here's what I was able to read about this technology and mobile surveillance in China of the Uyghur population. Chinese immigration agents can install malware on people's smartphones that go through text message, photographs, calendars, events, call history, usernames, contacts, other applications. They can use all of this to then track and create a database and a list of individuals that the state is surveilling, looking to arrest. and oppressing. And the Xinjiang is a Muslim ethnic minority, is large in this region. And I think it shows the potential here for the Chinese have developed this program to monitor the Muslim population in their country. And I'm sure there are ways around this technology. I'm sure the technology is wrong many times, and I'm sure people can get really sophisticated that's claiming you don't have a cell phone, even though I'm sure they'll search for it. So maybe I'll have to get fake phones and figure out ways around it, or maybe create a phone that you give to authorities that is mostly blank or just has a couple contacts. That might be one way to kind of screw with the database. I also wonder, in reading this about China and the United States, and it applies to any country, is at what point does the government collect too much data that it can't then sift through the data to make sense of the data, right? It can be so overwhelmed by the quantity of data that it doesn't know what it's really telling them. It doesn't know what to do with such a large, vast quantity of data that people produce every day, that dissidents produce, that I wonder sometimes doesn't really know how to actually create this ultimate surveillance state because it's overwhelmed by the quantity of data. It can't really make sense of what that data means to its society or to the threats posed by the individuals. What does the ability to dissent, and if so many people are doing it, can you really go and figure out that you're going to have to arrest millions of people? Can that really be done? Or are they only going to take out the leadership of those millions of people? I don't know how that process works, but it does make me think sometimes that you read these articles and you think that the government is this efficient machine, but behind the bureaucracy is massive amounts of inefficiency, massive amounts of corruption and abuse, and people getting apprehended who the machines tell them are some terrorist or illegal migrant or whatever. And it's none of the above. The machine is just completely wrong, but people won't doubt the technology. That I know of, right? People trust what the computers tell them. They won't believe the individual. So that's terrifying. People can be arrested, detained, abused, just because the computer says, no, this person is who I'm saying it is. And nobody will question, say the computer is wrong. The technology is wrong. I mean, that's the danger of it too. Who could be arrested and abused like this? I just want to quickly shift over to this other topic that also relates to technology that I found fascinating, which is, so in doing research about facial recognition, I somehow landed on this Business Insider article that talks about the Pentagon developing an infrared laser that can identify a person's unique cardiac signature up to 200 meters away. So this laser prototype known as Jetson measures surface vibrations caused by a heartbeat at a distance. And under the right conditions, this technology can achieve a positive identification of 75% of the time. So I guess we have unique cardiac signatures, and it can then identify who you are through your heartbeats. That's what the laser can do. So they put that at the scope of a gun. Or maybe they won't need facial recognition. They can just start identifying people at airports based on our heartbeats, which I guess means we'll have to wear a special plate around our chest to scramble with the heartbeat detectors that we have at our airports in the future, huh? I mean, you got to fight this from multiple avenues, both politically and individually and collectively. It's got to be a full frontal sort of coalition on multiple fronts: legal, political, collective scrambling of these type of technologies. Yeah, it is terrifying. I just think the fact that a laser can measure heartbeats, it tells us so much about where we are today in this development of technology. Pretty amazing. Okay, so to wrap up here, I did want to mention this article before we close, because democracy and authoritarianism is a really interesting topic that I've been talking about and following for many years. I want to mention it again because I saw something just a couple days ago that talks about in the next 5 years, authoritarian countries will account for half the global income, which, according to a recent report, it will be the first time in more than a century that that's happened. It's the growth of China, Russia, and other authoritarian governments throughout the world, the Middle East, Africa. The fact that they're growing fast economically, some people are pointing this as a sign of economic decline, right, of democracies, and saying democracies are under threat because authoritarian governments are now growing in their political clout. And everybody's really talking about China in this one as being one of the largest examples of authoritarian governments. I read articles like this. I'm skeptical of this because if we know history, there have been times where authoritarian governments have grown very fast, even faster than democracies. And it happens for decades. And then it eventually reaches a crisis. And one of the enduring things about democracy is that its institutions are able to hold together during times of social strife, social struggle, social change. And authoritarian regimes oftentimes don't have the ability to hold the country together when people rise up. So authoritarian governments oftentimes have weak institutions. What I mean by that is police, civil society, the elites are often divided. So when there is an uprising, people could jump on the bandwagon of the protesters and fight against the government and take them down. It's why sometimes I look at these articles and I think, oh my God, authoritarian regimes, they're taking over. Everybody's in a panic. Democracies are dying. You see all of these things, and yet democracies have this ability somehow to survive significant social dissent. Now, that said, I do worry that if another economic crisis happens in the next 2 to 3 years, and a country like China and Russia survive that economic downturn, and the economic downturn hits the United States significantly, how will that impact the United States and Europe? And I'd be curious to know if there is another global economic recession because of what's going on around the world with China and trade and all of these issues and Brexit. I wonder what kind of social change is possible. And I'm curious to know, could the democratic institutions that have supposedly held together for such a long time survive those type of social strifes that are bound to happen if we have another global economic crisis, not even as big as 2008, but something similar to it? I don't know. I sometimes also think that democracy's institutions, while stronger than authoritarian institutions, but that doesn't mean that there aren't certain conditions, if things line up correctly, that they themselves can't crumble like authoritarian governments. I think liberal democracy is under threat from many different perspectives. I think from technology, people not knowing what truth and reality are is part of that. And it goes back to Donald Trump's election. His ability to get elected, in my view, wasn't because of the Russians. The Russians saw an opportunity and they took advantage of it. That's how I see it. And they wanted to help Donald Trump. I think that's well established. I don't think there's nothing you can really do about that unless you create a very strong defense. Because in the end, the technology exists out there. It's a matter of you having to do something. And if one side of the government feels like Russia's intervention benefits them, why would they have any incentive to create a really strong defense and to block out the Russian interference into the elections? They would have none. They'd be like, why are we going to hurt ourselves? It could make a difference of 5,000 to 10,000 votes in one state, and that could tilt the election against us. It is sort of this decentralized power that technology has over us. And it does give the users, whoever they are, malicious or non-malicious actors, significant power and sway over society. And I think that that's most fascinating perspective, because now you're hearing about these deep fake videos And I swear when I heard it, I couldn't handle it. I had to like turn off the radio. I heard it on NPR a while back, but essentially it's a video of a person, let's just say Donald Trump, and I can make Donald Trump say or do anything I want. So the video is fake. But most people, when I send it out, will watch this video and they won't realize it's a fake video, that it's been manipulated and altered in such a way where Donald Trump is saying something that he never says. Again, the ability of democratic institutions to regulate the pace of technology is troubling to me. Again, for potential abuse, because people aren't ready to make sense of what technology can do to them. They're not going to look at a video and say, is this fake? Let me see if there's a reputable source out there also displaying this video. Because the video can be completely fake, but you can get somebody to say anything in that video and it sound exactly like them. I mean, this is deep fake. Oh my God. Oof. I'm telling you, man, this is why I feel that democracies have lasted a long time throughout the 20th century and their institutions held. I'm not so sure that their institutions are strong enough to hold this sort of technological change that we're undergoing at this pace. Yes, democratic institutions are more often than not stronger than the authoritarian institutions that can often crumble. And authoritarian states are often held together by violence. So democratic institutions aren't durable at all times. They do have weaknesses and they're being exploited, and I'm not sure the institutions can hold this type of onslaught. Maybe they can hold out longer than authoritarian governments, but we'll see. Okay, wow, this has gone a little longer than I intended. But yeah, so we'll see. So that's the verdict I have. Democracy, much stronger than authoritarian governments, even if the pace of economic growth might get stronger for authoritarian states. If you look back at the 20th century, authoritarian states have had trouble surviving economic growth or economic decline, and democracies tend to be stronger in surviving the downturns and social change and growth in immigration and population and things like that. So that doesn't mean that they're impossible from crumbling from the inside. Yeah, that about wraps up where I'm feeling at right now. Hopefully it was less depressing than it usually is when I talk about technology and developments. I'm sure the algorithms that send me these articles they're sending me these articles on purpose because they know I like reading about this, and they know that I'm probably a little bit more paranoid than the average person. But people need to be a little bit more paranoid in this era today. And I think too many people are out there just going through the motions of life. And that's what terrifies me. I think more than even the technology is that people disengage from what's going on all around them because they don't care, or they just have to take care of their family, which I can understand. But at the same time, it's like things are being done to you. You should be aware of those things. And if you don't care, fine. But really bad things and good things are coming. And I think too many people just wake up, go to work, come home, hang out with the family, go to bed, wake up, go home. And it's just life becomes a routine. And that terrifies me more because you can easily make an algorithm out of that. Right? When people are into their habits and routines and we just repeating the same motions year in, year out, every month, every day. I don't know. You kind of feel like spontaneity is a radical descent nowadays to break up from the monotonous behaviors that humans just have in general. I'll leave you with that final thought. Hope you enjoyed it. Collateral Banter, episode 38. Thank you for listening. I will be interviewing a few more people in the near future. I will probably read from Baudrillard's book at some point and have a conversation with people out there. I think people enjoy those conversations. I hope to connect his books to our realities today, to make sense of what we're experiencing and what would Baudrillard say about all of the social media and technologies that exist. All right. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care. Peace.